Hey everyone, it's Nathan, and I have for you another 25 movies challenge. You probably forgot I was even doing the 25 movie challenge. In fact, it's been almost a year since I released season 3, which was me watching 25 westerns for the first time. But if you're new, the 25 movies challenge is a way for me to focus on specific categories within my watch list. I have over 1,000 movies on my watch list, and by doing these 25 movies challenges, it helps me narrow down what kinds of movies I want to watch. The idea behind the 25 movies challenge is it also helps you watch those movies that have been on your watch list forever, that have just been collecting dust on the watch list, and you can finally have a reason and some motivation to watch it. Season 1, I focused on movies from the 70s. Season 2, I focused on 5 actors and 5 movies from each of them. Season 3 was 25 westerns I had never seen. And season 4, I used a wheel to randomize every movie that was on my watch list, obviously except for movies that have not been released yet. So this was a really interesting season because I never knew what I was getting myself into next. I didn't know if I'd be watching a horror movie, a western movie, or in one case you'll see later on this list, a Christmas movie. It was all completely randomized, and today I want to talk about the 25 movies that the wheel chose for me. I will be going in order of when I watched these movies. I'll give a brief review of each movie, and then I'll also explain why this movie was on my watch list to begin with. And then at the end of the video, I'll share a ranking. So the first movie that was spun on the wheel was Dreams, directed by Akira Kurosawa. This movie was on my watch list for 2 reasons. It's in the Criterion Collection and it's directed by Akira Kurosawa. I really enjoyed this film. It's not one that I necessarily see myself rewatching anytime soon or ever for that matter, but that doesn't mean I disliked it. I like anthology films if I can get invested in the story, and this one was intriguing enough that it was really fascinating to see just different dreams in each segment. It's a very visually stunning movie, and to me that's the biggest pro of Dreams. The next movie that was spun was a movie that I never saw myself actually watching. It was just doing exactly what these movies do on the watch list, collecting dust. I knew about it, but I was too scared to watch it. It was the Star Wars Holiday Special. And this movie was atrocious. The reason this was on my watch list is because I've heard all the notoriously bad things about it, and so I was curious. I wanted to see, is it really that bad? I can confirm it is as bad as other people say. It was an easy 1 out of 10 for me. Just a very messy movie. You can tell the main stars do not want to be there, and the majority of the film is spent with this Wookiee family, and it's just really weird. The entire thing, it's very strange, and I can see why Lucasfilm is trying to erase this from their history because it is not a good movie at all. The next movie that was spun was Rain Man. Now this was on my watch list because it's a Best Picture winner. I also like Tom Cruise and Dustin Hoffman, so those were just 2 pluses. I didn't know too much about it going into it. All I knew was that Dustin Hoffman played someone with a mental disability, and Dustin Hoffman really gives a great performance. However, I want to highlight Tom Cruise. I think that he gets overshadowed by Dustin Hoffman. I mean, Dustin Hoffman won the Oscar for this and everything, but I think Tom Cruise's performance was very important as well. The movie itself was really enjoyable, just fun seeing the 2 of them get closer on this road trip of sorts kind of movie, and I'm glad this challenge had me watch it. The next movie I watched was War of the Worlds from 1953. Now this was on my watch list because I'm a fan of sci-fi movies, especially these kinds of sci-fi movies from the 50s. At least I'm intrigued by them. I want to see what they're like. This was also on my watch list because it is in the Criterion Collection, and so that always interests me with movies. And I actually wasn't a big fan of this one. My biggest issue with these monster movies from the 50s is it seems like a lot of the times they're very good on spectacle. They're good at actually showing the monsters attack, in this case the Martians, and they're very colorful films, so it's fun in that sense, but the characters are just so flat. I don't care for anyone in this movie, and so the thing I'm watching it for is solely for the Martians, so when it's not showing the Martians, I'm just very bored and I don't really care what's happening. One of the supplements on the disc though is the original Orson Welles radio broadcast of the War of the Worlds, and I can see why people back in the day thought it was a real broadcast because it's very well done. The next movie that was spun is called The Hero. This was on my watch list because the plot really intrigued me and it's part of the Criterion Collection once again. I have quite a few Criterions on my watch list, so there are higher chances that they're spun in the challenge. It's a movie that can be kind of slow, but I was never necessarily bored. I like the kinds of movies where someone is reflecting on their life, where they're thinking about different decisions that they've made on their journey. Now this one follows someone in the movie business, and so it was fascinating seeing a movie about a movie, but it's not set in Hollywood. In fact, the film really takes place on a train ride. There are several dream sequences, and I really liked these specifically, but overall the movie was most enjoyable because it really just gives you that appreciation for life, but also makes you think about life and decisions you've made as well. The next movie spun was The Strawberry Blonde. This stars James James Cagney and Olivia de Havilland. I don't really know why this was on my watch list. I think it was because of both James Cagney and Olivia de Havilland. I like both those actors, especially Olivia. I enjoy the movie. There are little things that bother me, like at one point a character is kind of caught in the act of cheating on someone and it's just brushed aside like it's not really too concerning for any of the characters, and that was a little alarming to me. I'm like, no, let's pause on this. Let's address this. This is not okay. But other than that, I really liked Olivia de Havilland, especially in this film. She's just really pretty and very flirtatious in one scene. They're on a date, James Cagney and her, and she's just so ahead of her time. Like her acting, it feels different from other actresses in this era. And that's why I think she stands out to me so much. It was a fun movie that I appreciated. The next movie spun was The Setup. Now, this movie came out in 1949. It was on my watch list because I'm a big fan of boxing movies. You'll never catch me in the ring itself, but I love boxing movies. In fact, they're my favorite subgenre of sports films. Give me a boxing film and I will most likely be happy. The movie follows a boxer who's expected to lose, and so his own trainer is betting against him, hoping that he will lose, but when he actually pulls off a win, the whole night changes and the consequences come. It's a very frustrating movie, but at the same time, it was very memorable to me and left a big impression on me. It was definitely one of my favorite watches of the challenge, and I would highly recommend it. Senso is also a member of the Criterion Collection, but it was actually on my watch list for Farley Granger. I'm a pretty big fan of him. I enjoy him especially in Rope and Strangers on a Train, so I wanted to dive deeper into his filmography, and Senso was really good. It's a little strange because it is a foreign language film and they dub Farley Granger so that he speaks a different language, and so that was a little distracting at first because as a fan of Farley Granger, I know what his voice sounds like. Definitely doesn't sound like that. Other than that though, it was a good movie to watch. Again, kind of like The Setup, it is frustrating. I couldn't watch this movie any day of the week. I would definitely have to prepare for it, but it's good enough that I think I would rewatch it someday. I got good stuff out of it and I'm glad that I saw it. The next movie spun was The Catered Affair, made in 1956. This was on the watch list because I'm a big fan of Ernest Borgnine and he is one of the stars of this film. It's about Bette Davis and Ernest Borgnine. They are a married couple. Their daughter is getting married. However, they're very poor, and you see that as they're planning the wedding, it's very stressful for the parents because they don't have the money to make the wedding happen. It's also frustrating for Bette Davis, the title character, because she's kind of throwing on wishes from her own marriage onto her daughter's. The daughter doesn't see eye to eye with her, and it's almost like Bette Davis is living through her daughter. And so it's a good movie as far as watching the family drama ensue. As long as you know you're getting yourself into a movie with family drama, then I think you'll enjoy it. The next movie spun was Early Summer. This movie was on my watch list because it is in the Criterion Collection once again. Setsuko Hara is definitely the standout for me. I think she has such a warm smile. She's such a beautiful lady, and I really liked her in this movie. I also can see where she's coming from. I mean, if I was her in this situation, a single woman at 28, and I had the same options for guys to date as she did, then I would also stay single because not the best options in my opinion. Outside of her though, I didn't really think any of the other characters were too interesting. She was really the standout, and so I really enjoyed the movie most when it was focused on her and she was on screen. Next movie spun was The Money Trap. This was on my watch list because Glenn Ford stars in it, and I'm a big fan of Glenn Ford. The movie was pretty good. It starts off really strong with a very jazzy score, and I thought, okay, are we gonna get some kind of Anatomy of a Murder movie with a really good score, really good plot? We didn't get that. I found it to be just decent. I do like Glenn Ford here. It was cool also seeing him work with Rita Hayworth again, just like they did in Gilda, but I felt like the movie was a little all over the place, and in the end I just found it to be decent. The next movie spun was Jeremiah Johnson from the 70s. This was on the watch list for Robert Redford. After I watched him in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid last year, I wanted to check out more of his filmography, so I think it was at that time that I found this movie, put it on my watch list. It was only later that I realized this is the iconic movie that you see from the GIFs where Robert Redford like does that nod as it zooms in on him. So it was really funny that I checked that iconic movie off the watch list. It's definitely one of the most mountain man movies I have seen, and so if you're into outdoorsy movies, I think you'll really enjoy this. It was sadder than I was expecting. It goes in a lot of directions where bad things happen to characters. I think it did a really good job with dwelling on those sad moments and not just like moving on. For that, it was memorable, and overall I found it to be a good movie. The next movie that was spun was the 1923 The Hunchback of Notre Dame. This is the one that is a silent film. It stars Lon Chaney, and it was on my watch list for a few reasons. Silent film, I like those. I also love the story of Hunchback, and so I wanted to see that in a silent film version. And then also I want to dive more into Lon Chaney's work, and so it had a few reasons to be on my watch list. It's not a bad movie by any means, but I just prefer the 1939 version in every way. So I'm just gonna move on to the next one. The next movie I watched was Nights of Cabiria. Now, this was on my watch list because it's a Criterion in the collection, and I was really impressed with this movie. It is a very sad tale. By the end of it, it had me feeling optimistic, but at the same time melancholic, and the fact that they were able to make me feel such opposite emotions was very impressive. You're following this lady of the street, Cabiria, who is very poor and just trying to make a living. She finds a man, starts falling in love with him. I won't explain the whole entire movie, but basically it's a movie that it's not an easy watch. You start to really like Cabiria, and so therefore you want everything good to happen to her, and so when you see things go against her, it's just very hard to accept and very hard to watch. So really good movie, not very rewatchable because it's pretty sad. The next movie I watched was The Big Sleep from 1978. No, it's not the Humphrey Bogart movie that you're probably thinking of. This movie was on my watch list for one reason alone, and that is James Stewart. I am trying to watch his complete filmography, and this movie was just not good at all. Very bad acting, bad writing, bad story, just all around a bad experience. The only good thing about this movie was I watched it late at night and I had my window open as snow was falling, and so that was very peaceful and the only saving grace of the movie. But that's not even the movie, that's more so the experience of watching the movie. Other than that, I did not like this movie at all. Funny enough, the next movie that was spun was also a James Stewart movie, which makes sense because since I want to watch his whole filmography, I have a lot of his movies on my watch list. That movie was Firecreek with James Stewart and Henry Fonda. In this movie, they play enemies of each other. Henry Fonda's the villain, James Stewart is in the heroic role, and I think it was pretty good, but it could have been a lot better. I wish that they made a bigger deal of Henry Fonda being the villain. Like, imagine this movie with a Once Upon a Time in the West type of villain for Henry Fonda. Would have made the stakes way higher and the final battle a lot bigger of a deal. Speaking of the final battle, that really is the best part of the movie. The final 20 minutes or so are great. Everything up to that was just fine. It was okay. I just think that this movie had a lot of potential to be a lot better, and it wasn't. So found it to be decent, could have been better. The next movie spun was A Carol for Another Christmas. This movie was on my watch list because it's directed by Joseph Mankiewicz, which I really appreciate as a director, and it's written by Rod Serling, who I obviously adore because of the creation of the Twilight Zone. And this movie was made for me. It felt exactly like an 84-minute Twilight Zone episode, and so as you can imagine, I had a great time with this. It's a twist on A Christmas Carol, as you could probably guess from the title. It's very much so a modern retelling of A Christmas Carol, and it's made in 1964, and so it really addresses the problems of that era and gives us a great story. Plus, you can just tell it's written by Rod Serling, very masterfully written, very enjoyable, and a surprise appearance by Peter Sellers. If you're looking for a Twilight Zone-esque movie to watch or a good movie to watch around Christmas time, I would highly recommend A Carol for Another Christmas. The next movie that was spun is 1954's Secret of the Incas. I had this on my watch list because I'm trying to watch more movies that inspired Indiana Jones just to get a feel for older movies before Indiana Jones. And plus, Thomas Mitchell is a supporting actor in it, and I love him in anything I see him in. Those were the two reasons I went into it, and those were also the only two things I really liked about the movie. I loved any second Thomas Mitchell was on screen. Even though he plays a more villainous role in this one, I still found him to be the best character and the most enjoyable character to watch. And then the Indiana Jones aspects were great. Charlton Heston is the Indiana Jones per se of this film, except imagine Indiana Jones, but he's super dislikable and you don't want him to win in the end. That's who Charlton Heston is in this movie. And so you can imagine it wasn't the best movie because you want to root for the good guy, you want to like the hero. He was not likable here at all. The next movie spun was Cry a Beloved Country. Now, this was a film that I had on my watch list because Sidney Poitier is in it, and that's the only reason I had it on my watch list. And what I got was a decent movie. It's a well-made movie on racism and the problems of racism. It really addresses the problems back in the day, especially. Sidney Poitier plays a smaller role in this, unfortunately, so I didn't see too much of him. The best part of this movie was anytime Sidney Poitier was on camera, but also when they were addressing racism and the problems with it. I would recommend it if you're interested in that plot or Sidney Poitier. Otherwise, just skip this one. The next movie spun was Bud Abbott and Lou Costello Meet Frankenstein. This was on my watch list because I had previously watched an Abbott and Costello movie, Meet Captain Kidd, with Charles Lawton. That was why that was on the watch list. But this one specifically I had heard was the best outing with Abbott and Costello, so I wanted to give them another chance. And you know, I didn't really enjoy this one too much. I will say I was pleasantly surprised to also see Dracula and the Wolfman were in this film. I love those Universal monster movies, and so seeing them back was great and a pleasant surprise, but I just don't connect with Abbott and Costello humor. It's very slapstick, very straightforward. There's nothing really creative about it, and so I have a hard time laughing or caring really about what I'm watching. My favorite scenes in the movie movie were the ones where there was a foggy night and you were watching the monsters, but I didn't really think it was the best movie outside of that. The next movie spun was Hangover Square. This was on my watch list because I'm a big fan of noir films, and also it is categorized as a black and white horror film, which I'm also a sucker for, and so those were the two things that had me intrigued, and those were the two things I liked most about this movie. The film follows a musician who has these blackout moments. Basically, whenever something makes him angry, and then if he hears like a loud noise, he blacks out and he does these violent acts, murdering people or attempting to murder people. Pretty creepy stuff that made for an enjoyable movie experience. I will say the final 10 minutes are easily the best, very haunting, really enjoyed that. The movie before then was a good time, but it was those final minutes that really excelled the movie for me and made it better than it was before. The next movie spun was They Were Expendable. This was on my watch list because it's directed by John Ford, has Donna Reed, and has Robert Montgomery. Two actors I really like, and John Ford, you can't really go wrong with him. I wanted to like it a lot more, but unfortunately, I was just really bored in this one. There were some great naval battles, and anytime those were happening, it was very enjoyable. I also think the movie does a great job at memorials they have for fallen soldiers throughout the film. Really good there, but other than that, I was just really bored. Then we've got the Christmas movie on this list. The next movie that was spun was Winnie the Pooh, A Very Merry Pooh Year. So this movie came out in 2002, and rather than make like a full-length Christmas feature film of Winnie the Pooh, what they did is they started off with the 2002 animated film, and then they like go into the story mode version, and they literally just place the Winnie the Pooh and Christmas 2 short film from the 90s, and that takes up about half an hour of film. And then the second half is the new 2002 animated tale that takes place around New Year's. And so instead of doing like a 40-minute 2000 animated film, they felt the need to recycle the Christmas film from the 90s. And the most ironic part of it all was the 90s film, in my opinion, was the best part of this movie. Didn't really care for the 2000s segment. There's a story where they all switch personalities and you see Eeyore as Winnie the Pooh, and I found it to be, frankly, pretty scary. He acts like Winnie the Pooh. He's very energetic. He suddenly has teeth and he walks on two legs. Plus, Tigger calls Rabbit Rah-Rah, and I found that to be incredibly cringy. So anytime he was like, "Oh, what up, Rah-Rah?" I hated it. It just wasn't a very good movie. I wish I liked it more, especially for it being a Christmas animated movie. And my penultimate movie spun in the challenge was the 1989 TV movie, The Woman in Black. Of all the movies that I watched in this challenge, it's possible that this TV movie was on my watch list the longest. I put this on my watch list back in 2012 when the Daniel Radcliffe Woman in Black movie came out, and it was solely out of curiosity, what's the older version like? And I'll say, I really enjoyed this movie. You can tell right away that it's a TV movie just from the cinematography. You can also see it's a lower budget film, but the movie is still very eerie and creepy as well. I like that it doesn't do what the 2012 version did, and that's have the Woman in Black haunt Daniel Radcliffe just for the sake of haunting him. Whenever she appears in the movie, she's there being creepy, but she's not just like walking around the house, opening doors, rocking and rocking chairs, popping up in the window. It's not like the 2012 version in that sense, and I liked that. I liked that it was a more mild horror film. There is a particular scene in the bedroom that was very creepy to watch, and if you've seen the movie, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you have a chance to watch this one, save it for October and give this one a watch because it will be worth your time. I really enjoyed it. Also, one of the coolest connections in movie history, in my opinion, is the guy who plays Arthur Kidd in this adaptation, Adrian Rollins. He would later play James Potter in the Harry Potter series. Then, of course, Daniel Radcliffe, Harry Potter, would play Arthur Kidd in the 2012 adaptation. And so I think it's cool, that connection between the two actors. Who knew that they would both be playing Arthur Kidd? And my final movie watched for this 25 movies challenge was The Red Shoes. This movie was on my watch list because it's a Criterion, but also I've only heard great things about it, so I was very curious. I think it's a great way to end the challenge too. I've only seen one Pressburger and Powell film before, and that was A Matter of Life and Death. And while I enjoyed that movie, I mostly loved it for the color, the spectacle, the set designs. And so going into The Red Shoes, I had those same expectations. And I can confidently say I like The Red Shoes a lot more than A Matter of Life and Death. To me, there was just a story that I cared more about. I liked the characters too, and I thought that the story was very good at portraying conflict with this lead Vicky character. The title performance, The Red Shoes, when that ballet performance actually takes place in the film, it lasts for a good 15 or so minutes, and I was completely glued to the screen. I could have had the remainder of the movie be just that performance because it was so well done. I love how they presented the choreography, but also how they presented the conflict that Vicky was going through. Just really good way of presenting horrors that she was having, but also making sure that she gets the performance done correctly. So that's my 25 movies challenge season 4. On the screen right now, you'll see a ranking of all the movies from 25 to 2 number 1. There were really only 2 stinkers, Stars Holiday Special and The Big Sleep. Everything else was enjoyable enough. Now I know you're just dying with anticipation. What is the next challenge, Nathan? Please give it to us. I need to know. I've been waiting a whole year. So I will tell you, there will be a season 5 of the 25 movies challenge. I'm excited for it as well. For this season, I had 6 potential categories in store for what I'd be watching 25 movies from. They were as follows: 5 genres, 5 movies, 5 directors, 5 movies, movies from the 2000s, specifically 2000 to 2009, Best Picture winners, animated films, and movies from the 1920s. So I've already spun the wheel, and season 5 will be focused on movies from the 2000s. Yay! I'm really excited about this category specifically because this is a huge decade that I neglect. I'm such a fan of the classic movies, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, that I neglect so many movies from the 2000s, modern day movies, that have been on my watch list just collecting dust. In this challenge, I'll give you a sneak peek of some movies that I'll be watching. We've got Capote with Philip Seymour Hoffman. That's been on my watch list for years. Zodiac. The Notebook with Ryan Gosling. I love the guy. Have never seen the movie all the way through. Anchorman, Gran Torino, Mystic River. There are so many movies from the 2000s that have been on my watch list that I haven't seen, and so I'm excited that this season will be focused on those movies. Let me know in the comments below what movies you're checking off of your watch list, and if you're doing a 25 movies challenge yourself, please let me know. I'd love to hear about it and see what movies you're watching and discovering for the first time. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.